Kristin Hall. While Kristin's coming up, Kristin's the State Wildlife Action Plan Coordinator for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources Non-Game Wildlife Program. She has a background in bird research and conservation biology and is currently researching Kestrels' full annual life cycle movements via MOTUS towers in order to determine the potential cause for their decline over the past few decades.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So I am here to talk about kestrels, not only because they're my very favorite bird and they're just small and fierce, but because they're a bird that needs a little more attention. I have to start off by saying this has been an awesome session. So thank you everyone who's put it together and everyone who has presented. And I have no doubt Gia will end us well. But it's just been really great to hear from everyone. I wish I had more time in my world to dig into the data I do have, but I'm super impressed by the level of information that we've gotten today. I hope I advance this correctly. Okay, so just like all old movies, I'm going to start with a thank you, and my credits are rolling, so I just force you guys to read these names with me. I want to start by thanking my co-authors. We did publish a paper on this information, as well as the supporters that I've had throughout this work. I will forget names. I don't list all the volunteers and helpers, but there's a lot of people that have really helped out on this. Mark Martell and Althea, they're the ones that helped me publish the paper. Althea ran our statistics and is really a whiz at that. Frank Nicoletti, got to work with him, which is super awesome, and he helped us expand our data, or our capture sites up to Saxon Bog. Mary Lee and Amber were part of the Fab 4 that started this project and let me in, which was really great. Sarah Kendrick helped me get funding for this. She's with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and a MOTUS guru. And then I really have to give a shout out to my bosses to let me do this. I mean, my job is not this. So it's pretty awesome. I just have to say they were great. And then a shout out to a group I work with called the Larks that gives me support in my life in the world, and all the volunteers that work with me, and the supporters that are tower hosts, and I'll get to that in a minute. So what I'm going to talk about today is the who, why, what, and where. So why kestrels? Because they're awesome, but more than that. Why MOTUS? Some of our findings to date, and really all good science leads you to more science. So a lot of more questions have arisen since we've started this research, and a lot more study is needed. So a lot of these stories are starting the same. We've got birds that are declining, and we need more information, and we need more knowledge as to why they're declining. Kestrels were highlighted as a species of greatest conservation need, and we don't know the reasons for decline. And there's been quite a bit of research done on kestrels. They're kind of a more common bird. You see them around. They're not super rare, but they are declining, and they've really been declining precipitously in the past 20 years. This is just the BBS route data declines. It's 1.4% annually, but in Minnesota or in the Midwest, that decline is actually steeper. I have my thoughts about that, and I might share them at the end if I have time. And those reasons are largely unknown. Where in the life phase are they hitting these threats? What are those declines caused by? Is it habitat? Is it nesting sites? Is it exposure to chemicals? All those questions are free for the taking. So when I first came to the DNR, it was Jane Norris who said, hey, you like birds and you work with birds, and we've got this bird that we need more information on. How about you go do something about it? I said, cool, I would love to do that. And so with that encouragement, I started looking at different literature that was available and realized there had been a study on information up to date as to what the causes of decline are and what work has been done. It was McClure et al., a 2017 paper that kind of highlighted recommendations for future research. And I was able to hone in on two of those, one of which was just understanding the annual life cycle of kestrels. They're a funny bird because they're just small enough not to wear transmitters and just big enough to bite you and cause you to bleed. So with that and my background, I thought, this is something I could start to add information on. I do telemetry, I understand all of that, this will be great. Then I had to look into the technology that exists for tracking kestrels. And the reason why they haven't been tracked is because of their small body size. And as you go from west to east in our nation, they get smaller in body size. So there have been GPS studies on kestrels in the west, but that was just at the crux of the size of telemetry transmitters that they could wear. So I looked into the geolocators that Annie talked about, where you have to get them back, and it's like giving your kid a cell phone and hoping to God they don't break it or just leave it someplace, and then they come home. Kestrels aren't known for high site fidelity. We do have nest box programs, but you rarely see the same kestrel come back to the same box. So I thought, that probably isn't the best idea. And then there's this MOTUS network that is coming online, and it's actually been under development for at least the past decade, really growing in strength over the past 5 years or so. And it is a different kind of telemetry, and I have to say, I am a cheerleader and a skeptic of this, of this technology. It is awesome because it's allowed us to see learn a lot of information about many smaller species that we don't know much about. It is super frustrating, and I'll get to that later. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Mark. It is stationary telemetry, so the receiver sits in one place, and the pings that you get are from the tag that is on the species of interest that passes that receiver. So traditional telemetry, you're out there looking for it, and you find the bird. You can get a lot more information on traditional telemetry, like habitat use and home range size and those types of things. MOTUS isn't for that. MOTUS is mostly for migration, mostly for learning full annual life cycle stuff. If birds leave in the breeding time, when do they come back? Timing of migration, timing of breeding, all those types of things can be found out with MOTUS. And so that started to answer some of my questions. We decided this was a technology to go with. But those stationary receivers have to be at play in order to get any information on the birds or the species that you have tagged. Bats are also tagged with MOTUS, and insects as well. So when I say smaller, I'm not talking just kestrels, I'm talking smaller, like dragonflies. Pretty cool stuff. Hope you can see this okay. I don't have a pointer. Oh, maybe I do. I do. These yellow dots, mostly along the eastern seaboard, are where MOTUS was in 2018. So this is the MOTUS network in 2018. That's just 4 short years ago. This is the MOTUS network in 2022. If you're interested, you can go to motus.org and mess around with the data. It's actually quite fun. The efforts that I've been involved in are within the Midwest. We got a multi-state grant to develop the MOTUS network within the Midwest so that then we could have researchers add to that by tagging whatever species of interest they have. It's crowdsourced science. It isn't proprietary. My receivers that I put out there are not mine, they are ours. Anybody can get a ping off of them, find out what that ping is and where that tower is. So it's actually a very cool system of science, and it's bringing a lot of collaborators together. This is just a quick snapshot of the towers, and I know some people in the audience have put towers up. I am a wildlife biologist by background, nature, and training, and this is not my area of expertise. It's really hard, and every one I put up is like a snowflake. They're all different. They all require something else that you didn't think of before you went out into the field. So there are about 19 towers in Minnesota now, and NRI has been instrumental in putting them up, as well as the Minnesota DNR and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But then there are also towers that are, I think the zoo has one, other places. You can put up your own tower. That's the cool part about this. But these are the towers that I know about. We have them I've partnered with all these entities to put them up. So it's not just me, it's a huge crowd. We've got one at Rydell. We've worked with a couple universities, St. Cloud State and Concordia College. DoD installations, so our first one was at Arden Hills Army Training Site, which has been awesome because it's right out my back door. 2 of them at Camp Ripley, and then we've been working with nature centers. We helped retrofit the tower at Saxon Bog and retrofit the tower at Carpenter Nature Center. So MOU helped fund that. I helped add to it so it could listen to 2 different frequencies rather than just one. And that additional work is done, again, by NRI and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So here's Minnesota. Here's the landscape of towers, again, in the yellow dots, and then the metro area is where we are tagging birds, and Saxon Bog is where we're also tagging birds. We have 2 main study sites. And I say the metro area because we're at Arden Hills tagging birds as well as Carpenter Nature Center. And then this is just super cool. I mean, we're interested in kestrels. Kestrels are interested in us too. They're using the MOTUS for a perch, which is really great. So even though it's not the best picture, I had to include that. So here's some of our methods and what the transmitters look like on the bird. We did our capture by hand in the nest box, which turned out to be the way to go, but we also did a lot of work on using balsha and a modified box trap on roadside trapping. And Arden Hills is spectacular for that. Mary Lee has been really awesome of letting us use that area. The attachment type is, we were able to use CTT, Cellular Tracking Technologies, and Cornell collaborated to form this backpack transmitter attachment style, and it's made of 3D printed material, which is crazy, but again, I'm not an engineer, wildlife biologist. Learned how to use it. It's super slick and made our processing time very quick. This is what it looks like with the transmitter attached. They're solar, but they also have a battery that the solar panel charges so that we get a lot of life. These are called life tags. The bird's head goes into that little hole, and these straps wrap around the chest like a little backpack. And then here's one on a kestrel. This is one on a kestrel in a nest box, which is also great because you rarely get to see that. This is just our transmitter deployment summary, and we were able to start this work in 2020, and it was our pilot year. Is this gonna work? Does MOTUS do what we want it to do? What type of MOTUS should we use? There's lots of choices to figure out what we need to do for this work. We attached most of our transmitters that year to all hatch year birds. We did 2 different types of transmitters. One was tail mount, and one was the backpack. From then on, we decided that the backpack was the preferred approach, as well as the CTT technology tags. In 21, we deployed 24 transmitters, a large focus on adults, and in 22, we deployed 25 transmitters. I'm gonna take a drink of water. I have choked up here before. This is our MOTUS detection summary. Let me see, I can read it from here. So we're starting to look at where we're hearing detections outside of our capture sites. So remember, our capture sites have towers. Saxon Bog has a tower, AHATS has a tower. Saxon Bog's tower has had some power problems, so it was down for a while. The AHATS tower we have to take offline every winter. So there's fluctuating, again, this is MOTUS. Oh, MOTUS. Yay, MOTUS, rawr, MOTUS. So in 2021, again, it was all hatch year, and we had about 11% detections of those birds. This was also before that MOTUS network was built out. So it was kind of cart before the horse, but again, it was our learning year. We were trying to figure a lot of things out, and we did learn a lot. In 2021, we had about a 79% detection rate on our birds that we put out. MOTUS being built out, us getting more efficient in what we're doing. In 2022, we had an 88% detection rate. So this is just really briefly some of the results that we've come up with. I was tempted to throw another slide in here that actually has a MOTUS station, and they chart it out. It's an R-produced analysis where they chart out what direction the bird was flying, how long it was there, how many pings it had on it, what type of flight it was. So MOTUS is actually quite sophisticated in the information you can get from it. It is not just what I'm showing here, which is point-to-point travel. You can figure out when a bird leaves, if it was a flyover, if it's stuck around for a while, if it moved on, and you get timing of all that information. So it's actually pretty cool technology. I will highlight here, we did publish a paper. It's in press now. It's in the Journal of Raptor Research. So if you're interested in kestrels and MOTUS, that's a great place to go. These lines are just point-to-point detections that doesn't indicate travel or anything like that. Like I said, it's a stationary receiver that gets pings along the way. So they're line point-to-point, but they're not where the bird traveled. It could have gone anywhere in between. This first panel just shows all of our females that were tracked. Excuse excuse me, second one's all the males. I don't know why this happens. It's awful. And then we really don't have a ton of information, but some information on our juveniles, male and female. That was our data from 2021. In 2021, we only got midway through migration, and then we didn't hear from our birds again, which was a bummer, but it was also another part of the MOTUS network not being fully built out. So 2020 to 2022 was fraught with many challenges. MOTUS had a challenge because we couldn't get the antennas to place these towers. We had planned to have them all placed in 2020, and that just went. I still have 2 towers that I need to put out. So nobody's fault. It was just a really difficult time to get those towers placed. My gosh, this is the second time that I have done this. I'm so sorry. So, knowing that the towers weren't fully deployed in our first year, and looking at our detections outside of the breeding area. So I went by age class and looked at detections after they left where we had trapped them. Those detections are quite low for our hatch year, even though, so this is all of it. This is everything put together, and now we're getting more detections further south, or more detections outside of our breeding area. Our adults were they were detected on towers more often. This actually bears out in the literature as well with band returns, but band returns, you only get like 2% returns for kestrels all over. So MOTUS is giving us much more information on kestrels than we had had in the past. That said, it's only giving enough information that just keeps us dissatisfied. Like, it's not quite the questions answers that I have been looking for. In all, we have a 57% return rate on our bands. If you count each ping as a band return, it's pretty cool. A lot of good information. And one of my MOTUS moments is that we haven't been able to analyze our data from spring and fall of this year. The R package has a glitch in it somewhere, and it's not running the data, or it's not finishing the data run, and I'm working with the folks that run MOTUS right now to get that done. So I apologize that I don't have any cool information from 2022, because 2022 has a big build-out of MOTUS network, and we have at least 2 of our birds that have made the trip all the way down into Mexico, which is spectacular and much farther than I thought they went. We kind of assumed short-distance migrants, they probably stop in Texas. Now we know they don't necessarily stop in Texas. So here's some of our interesting finds, and some things we already knew, some things are new to us. They do have low site fidelity for nesting, so the geolocators probably wouldn't have been a good choice, and I'm glad we didn't choose those. We only had 2 that returned to the same nest area, but not the same nest box. Again, band recaptures for kestrels in general are relatively low, so MOTUS brings us a lot more information. MOTUS detections are telling us a lot more about just distance traveled or point to points. They're telling us about when they leave, how far they go, when they come back. We do have 3 birds that we have multiple seasons of data on. We're also finding, and this isn't wildly surprising, but it's now documented, that juvenile survival rate or juvenile return rate. I'm not going to assume anything about our birds that aren't pinging, but I can start to assume that they aren't returning, and that juvenile age range is where we need to get a lot more information. And why throw a white-throated sparrow up in the middle of a kestrel presentation? Because this is just a small highlight. I had a bunch more maps in here, but I didn't want to waste time. MOTUS is awesome. You can find different birds on your towers. Like, it's fun to, it's like you get a little mail from a white-throated sparrow, or, you know, every time you check your receiver, you find out who's passed by. Every time you check your birds, you find out where they've gone. So it's really cool. You share that information with other researchers. I've worked with other researchers that are interested in kestrels to do more MOTUS work. We're working with a broader consortium of kestrel researchers to find out answers to these questions. So it's actually super cool. That crowdsourcing method is amazing. And I thanked my people in the beginning. Now I'm going to thank my places to wrap things up. These are the folks that have hosted towers or helped me with putting up towers. And I know Steve was up here earlier, and it's like the Steve show today of every project he's touched in one way or another. But remember when Alexis gave him a hug and she was really tiny and he's really tall? At Saxon Bog, we had to retrofit the tower and put up some antennas. And a ladder plus Steve is what got us to the top of it, which was awesome, and I couldn't have done it myself. So that's the type of help I got along the way. Arden Hills is hosting a site. Camp Ripley, St. Cloud, Concordia State, U of M, they've helped me a ton with just learning about MOTUS and putting up those towers. Fish and Wildlife Service, Carpenter Nature Center, and their supporters, Tropical Wings, MOU, and individual donors. So really great stuff and awesome to have all these folks to work with. It's also a super fun project. This bird is just great. You can see them when you're driving anywhere, and if you just look up a little bit, you can see kestrels. They are declining, but they're not that rare. And then we have a chance to actually research what's happening with them now to keep them off those lists that we don't want to hear about. So thank you guys for your time, and I think I can take questions. These are also my funders, also important to mention. LCCMR couldn't have done it without them, and a state wildlife grant that we received. So thank you.
Excellent. We definitely have some time for questions if folks have them.
Hi, I'm Ann Hanley. I had a question about your juvenile returns. So do you know that the juveniles migrated and didn't come back, or you saw them right around the nest and then nothing?
So that's a great question, and thanks for asking. We did observe birds after we put transmitters on them, just to make sure they were fine and whatnot. At Arden Hills, we had the ability to go out often and see what birds are doing. Also at Saxon Bog, they have volunteers that monitor their sites. So we know that at Arden Hills, most of the kestrels leave at the end of the summer. So they pinged on our tower, and one kestrel, one juvenile, pinged on a tower outside of our breeding area. So we know they survive fledging. It's the dispersal that and migration that were those windows that we're looking at.
Yeah, I'm Rebecca Mellonton, and
Oh, I can't hear you.
I'm Rebecca Mellonton, and I wondered if insect population decline might have something to do with the kestrels as well.
Yes, so one of the future areas of study I would like to see, so remember I mentioned in the beginning that in the Midwest, kestrels are declining faster. The land use differences between the Midwest and the West are mostly agriculture and rangeland, if you want to be general. So does that have something, is there something behind that, and is the lack of insects and the habitat use differences kind of playing out there? I would also like to see kestrels and shrikes paired together because they have a similar diet. I'd like to find out more about their diet and their intake. I've thought to myself a couple times in this past year, maybe I should have been an entomologist because I need to study more on the insects and that decline that might be really responsible for this decline.
I'm Andrea Lambrecht, and I have a question regarding two things. Number one is, a number of years ago, it has been, quite a few years now, they had the kestrel boxes on the back of highway signs, and I haven't seen nearly as many as there used to be. I wondered if those were still being maintained or still being put up.
So that was a effort to provide nesting habitat for kestrels, and it was along, Iowa did it as well. It was along highways, and they put boxes up. Over time, if that project doesn't have a champion and signs gets replaced or they get hit by plows or whatever, then the box gets taken down. Sometimes the DOT administrators didn't like the boxes because it was hard to maintain those signs. They took the boxes down, and then there's just not been an effort to put them back up. I will say that the Peregrine Fund has a kestrel nest box program that has gotten many more kestrel nest boxes out on the landscape that aren't on signs or affiliated with places that might be more impacted like that.
Thank you. My second question just had to do with last year with the drought and the increase in grasshoppers to the west, primarily in the western part of the state. Did that have any influence on the population because, or the reproduction because of the available food?
It might. Like I said, I haven't studied their foraging. Hallie Lambo is studying some of their foraging inputs, and she's a student working with Frank and Matt, I believe. So we're looking to find out more information, but I would imagine, and like I said, that insect-related question, I think that's really related. Thank you, guys. Oh, one more.
I think we'll move on to the next one. Thanks.
I'll catch up with you, Mike. Thanks, guys.